Hi guys, today I want us to go over network system design implementation setups using VMware environments like VMware Workstation. It's going to be pretty much what we're going to be doing today. That's application going to be using today for VMware environment. So here I have a design layout which encompasses the internet, cloud, obviously in the cloud or the internet as a cloud basically, and then firewall router. In this case, that's going to be a software router using a pfSense, which happens to be a Linux-based system. And then we're going to have a virtual switch that our end device are going to be connected to. We're going to name that virtual switch segments LAN 1. And end devices would include a Windows Active Directory server, which you're gonna design or implement, with two systems that are gonna be uh, joined to the AD server or Windows Active Directory server using Windows Server 2012, and then create logins on it for these users to have access to it. So it's going to be an interesting design. And for requirement, hardware requirement or specification for implementation, you should have at least a minimum of 8 gig RAM to get this lab implementation set up. Otherwise, your machine is gonna freeze to death. I mean, it's just gonna stall, take forever, and everything's just come to complete halt, during the process. So ideally, I would advise a minimum of 8 gig RAM, and you can go all the way. 16 is much more ideal, especially with this setup. But if you can afford 16, it's not that bad. I mean, it can get you by depending on how much applications you run on your machine or how much system resource you have available to run this whole setup. If you do have 16 or 32 bits, 16 or 32 gig RAM, that should be the ultimate uh, uh, specification that you probably want to be using. Okay, so this is the layout, and we're just gonna go one at a time. Set them up one at a time, and see how well we can put them all back together at the end, and see how they work perfectly to address our design needs that we have. I'm using Dire, which happens to be for the design layout I sketched over here. I'm using Dire, which happens to be a short name for diagram built by um, uh, if I'm not mistaken, it's a German German application. Yeah, that should be a German application if I'm not mistaken. Uh, yeah, that's a German application. Okay, yeah, it was designed by a German guy, and it's very it's a good alternative to um, your Visio. If this is open source, free of charge, as compared to um, license-based Visio. This is free. You can just download it, open source, under the public library system. So you have this option as an alternative for even your flowcharts, designs, and what have you. It's very, very well adapted to your design diagram needs. Anyway, so with that said, let's move on to our VMware environment that's going to help us put all of these together. I'm using Vmware Workstation, which happens to be a Type 2 hypervisor system. Type 2 hypervisor systems are just designed to help you um, host multiple virtual machines on a single physical platform or physical machine or physical computer system. Type 1s are the enterprise grades ones, which are more or less geared towards enterprise system. They actually become the main operating system that runs on the machine, whereas the Type 2s are the ones that softwares and firmwares as well as applications that runs on an operating system. So in this case, we have a VMware Workstation, which happens to be Type 2. It's going to be running off Windows 10 operating system on my physical laptop over here. Okay, so to start the design process or the setup, we first need to just create a new virtual machine. We're going to start out with let's start with the pfSense software router first. So at least when I added other devices to it, it can handle DHCP configurations for IP leases to end devices. And on top of that, we we do need a machine, a Windows machine, a workstation that can help us finalize the installation or the final setup of the pfSense software router. So we do need to have the setup first. And then once that is set up, we can basically install a workstation with an operating system on it. Hopefully it's going to be Windows operating system that would use to access it and then complete our final setup on the pfSense of the router. Okay, so back to VMware. So you just go to a wizard, nest, and with VMware's, ideally you should use images if you can. Since today most people don't use CD-ROMs or CDs very often, the best alternative here is best option is to use images, iOS images. So I do have a whole bunch of iOS images of various operating system, and we can just use some of these images. So with that one, we need our pfSense software router. I'm using version 2.4.2 release, 64-bit operating 64-bit architecture. If you do have a 32-bit, you probably want to go with a 32-bit, which is the i386. But I have a 64-bit machine, so I'm going to be using a 64-bit version. So that happens to be the image. Open it. You can always get these free images you can download from pfsense.com. Open, so that we have the image in there in our system or in our configuration, our setup. Click next, and when it comes to the guest operating system, so let me go back to one thing though. For the tier 2s hypervisors, the hypervisor sits, or that system application sits on an operating system, and it happens to be it would act as the host, and every other virtual machine that you create on it becomes guest. So in this case, my physical machine, which is hosting the Type 2 VMware Workstation, would now have guest systems or guest virtual machines run on them. So hence you have the guest operating system. So this pfSense software happens to be a Linux-based operating system. So we're going to pick Linux. Happens to be a Linux-based application. So we're going to pick Linux. It's not a Windows machine. And then the version is going to be this actually pfSense actually happens to be a free BSD distro, but unfortunately you can't find the right version over here. The right version of the free BSD that you need. So we're going to pick the other kernels, which is in this case the Linux base 2.4.x, which is what I have, kernel, and a 64-bit version. So you pick that right there, and then you go to Nest, and the Nest window on your wizard process or stages would ask you for the machine of the virtual machine you want to create, the name of the virtual machine you want to create. In this case, I'm going to name it network server. It's going to be a network server or network router. And I'm going to choose a folder. Ideally, I always like to put my VMwares in a more structured folder so I can easily locate them whenever I need them, or easily, for easy references purposes. Let me see. So I'm going to put them in my, and I'm going to create some folders. So I have a folder called my VMwares, and I'm going to create some folders. I'm going to create a folder for my VMware. I'm going to name it the same name as I gave it to the VMware itself. In this case, be net server for short. So I'm going to house my software router inside this net server folder, and then I click OK. So it tells you where your uh, software router or your net server is going to be stored at. And you click Next. Since it's going to be a software router, it's just going to be handling routing, forwarding packets back and forth. You don't need to have that much huge storage for it. I think 8 gig is about enough. Yeah, that should probably do it for you. Then you have these two options over here, which gives you that option to basically split virtual disk into multiple files, which actually helps you move your virtual machines around much easily. Or you can just store it as just one big old file if you want. I'm just going to go with the default. Next. And then you have a summary of the specifications that you want your virtual machine to have. I'm going to customize a bit. So I do have memory, a default memory of only 384 meg. That's not enough. So we're going to push it up to about a gig. I want our router to be about a gig in the memory capacity. Processor, one processor with one core is about it. It's okay. It's standard. Because like I said, we're not going to be doing much heavy. This is just a lab setup, so there's not going to be much of any intensive computing going on. So one processor is about good enough. And then we have our network adapters. Now, since it's going to be a router, we at least need 2 network adapters. One for our WAN to go to the internet, and then one for our LAN. So the current specification, hardware specification we have is only one adapter. So we have to add one more to it. It's going to handle our LAN configurations. So you just click add, and then you have the options of hardware type that you need. So we need a network adapter, finish, and then you do have the 2. So you have 2 now. Like I said, a minimum of 2 for most routers. Routers should have at least 2 interfaces or network adapters. One for your NAT or for your WAN, and then one for your LAN. So in this case, the second adapter is going to be our LAN. So we have to, so this is going to be what's going to interface our LAN network. And this is what will interface our public network, sorry, our private network. And then the adapter 1 will interface the internet or our WAN side. And that should have a NAT, which helps us basically translate address back and forth from our private LAN into the WAN and vice versa. And then for our second adapter, it should be a LAN. So that's interfacing our LAN. So we have to create a LAN segment for it. So in the diagram over here, for instance, this will be our LAN. And it's going to be a virtual LAN, which is going to be part of a virtual switch or house on another virtual switch. So our LAN is over here and our WAN is over here. So this is adapter 1, adapter 2. Very good. So your WAN to the internet and then your LAN to your virtual switch. That's going to basically interconnect all the other end device that we have to the switch and then to the outside world. So to change this to a LAN setup, we have to go to LAN segment down here, click on LAN segment, and then go to LAN segments, and we wanna add a LAN segment. And if based on the diagram, I named it LAN 1. So our LAN so it's gonna be a LAN 1. That's the name we're gonna give it. So add, and then type LAN 1. So that will be our virtual switch that we have. Click OK, and then you select it. And then once you do that, you just click on any other hardware options. It basically registers. So you do have your network adapter 2 facing your LAN and the LAN 1 segment, and then your NAT for your public internet, for your public connectivities. And what else do we have? That should be about it. The most important thing are your memory, your processors, and your two adapters for your software routers. And then once that is done, you click close, and then you finish. So once that is done, you have your system show up within the housing menu for all of your virtual machines, or the housing panel for your virtual machines. So I have my network server or my software router app over there. So now let's start it and let's go through the installation process. So click power up or power the VMware, and then you should see this come up on your screen, which is practically just loading the files on the in the image for the pfSense installation. This version here is pretty smooth setup. You don't need much complicated, setup. It's pretty much designed to be simple to set up. Not the key, not the your intricate, complicated installation process. Just basic stuff with this. Accept, click OK, continue. I will select that, click OK. So basically, it's just a click options. Just OK, and that basically should walk you through the entire setup of your software router. Nothing complicated. So I like that about the pfSense. There's not much of a hassle involved. Just click, OK, and you're good to go. But we have to finalize the installation, and that's going to be done using a machine, a Windows machine, a Windows operating system machine to access the whatchamacallit, the web browsing interface that it has. By the way, yeah, the pfSense that's come with the web browser interface that allows you to basically do your configurations or your final configuration from that point on. So that's a good thing. So that's how we're going to be able to get access to the final installation of the pfSense. This will just give us more or less the general layout or general design of the pfSense setup within the command prompt interface of a Linux-based machine. So you're not going to have much to play around with. It's the web-based interface that gives you a lot more options to play around with the entire features and settings or modules that the pfSense software router has to play with. So the installation is now finished. Before exiting installation, would you like to open a shell in the new system to make any final manual modification? No, you don't need that. Just no. And then once you do that, you reboot, and you should be practically good to go with your pfSense software router. So it's coming up, it's just loading now. Give some few seconds, and you should have your pfSense up and running. And once that is done, we're just gonna get a Windows machine that's gonna access it. And then by default too, the pfSense, once you install it, comes with DHCP enabled on it. So that would help our second machine, our second guest machine, to actually acquire IP address automatically from the pfSense, and that would help us access the system to finalize our configurations. So let's give some few minutes or a few seconds more to go. So that's the web configuration module, which is basically housing the web interface. And once that is done, you have this. It's telling you have your one interface. It tells you the name of the one interface and its IP address. So that's what's giving us internet. But I will give internet to the system. And then your LAN interface, which is your EM1, it happens to be which will be your gateway basically at your LAN side. And the IP address of that is 192.168.1.1/24. Once this is set up, you're good for now. I mean, without any hassle or any complicated configurations, it should be set at this point. Now we just need to get our second machine, our second guest machine, to help us access this address, so we can, from the browser point of view, from the web-based interface, so we can finalize that configuration. So I already have a Windows 7 machine, already VMware image already set up. I'm just going to open it because it's already set up. It's just run it basically. I'm not going to go through whole installation process. Okay, so let me go to open. So in this case, we're not going to go to create a new virtual machine right now. We're not going to go through that process. We're just going to open a new machine, a VMware that's already open. That's already been set up. So Windows 7. So that's basically the running image of it. Open, and that's it. It's already set up. So we just power it up, and now Windows 7 will be up and running very soon. Oh, before that, we need to let me stop this for a second. We need to join this to the. We need to join these to the switch. So now basically we at this point over here. We have this. The preliminary setup is done for the pfSense or the software our network server. And now we want a workstation that's running a Windows machine, or any it can be a Linux operating system machine as well. That has got just a web browser to help you access the software router and finalize the configurations or the setups. So to help us achieve that, we have to make sure whichever guest machine we're going to be adding to it has to be part of this virtual switch. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So this Windows 7 machine needs to have, let's go to settings and make sure that it is part of its LAN segment is part of the virtual switch. So it's not like it's connected to the switch. Okay, great. So now it's part of it. That's a good thing. So that will basically help it acquire IP address directly from the pfSense, because it will be broadcasting IP address through the virtual switch. And then when this Windows 7 machine comes up and requests for an IP address, it can get a leased IP address from the pfSense. Okay, so when you click OK, and then you can power it up now. So power it up now. So now we do have two guest machines running. just that normally. So let's give some time for Windows 7 to load up. So Windows starting. Um, you can opt for a Windows 10 machine if you do have one. You can opt for that. Just install it. If you don't want to go through installation process, you can just go online and download Windows 10 VMware and then use it. That will save some time a lot. You know, this happens to be an unlicensed version of Windows 7, so you have that warning. Okay, so right away we got connectivity. We even have internet on it, yeah, because obviously there's already internet on PFSense. It's pulling IP address. It's pulling um, internet connectivity. It's sharing my internet connectivity from a machine is being shared with the VMware as well, so or with the virtual platform. So we have internet directly coming through. So that's great. You can check for IP address. Let's see what we got, and see if you can even ping the software router. So IP config. Let's see. We should have 100. Okay, so starting from 100, which is great, and then gateways 1.1. Perfect. So now see you can ping a gateway, which is a software router. Ping 192.168.1.1. It's responding, so that's great. All right. So now with that said, let's open a browser. If I would advise you use Firefox, or if you have Google. For some reason, Microsoft Explorer or Edge doesn't work very well accessing the initial default setup. So I would probably advise you to use Firefox as your browser to access the PFSense. So you just type in your browser the IP address of your PFSense, enter, and then go to the acceptance of security warnings, advanced, and then accept the risk and continue. So once you do, this happens to be the browser interface of your PFSense software router. This is the web-based interface of it. And username, by default, the username is just admin, and then the password is the same as the PFSense. So PFSense happens to be default password with the username of admin. And then you sign in. So now we're basically walking through the final stages of your PFS installation. Click next, and then name. I'm going to give the same name and net server. And then we don't have a domain name here. We don't have a domain set up here, so we're going to maintain a default domain name over here. We'll come back and change later after we configure our Windows server with a domain name. Then we'll come back and change this to match our domain name. The same applies to our DNS. Once we have the Windows server configured, we'll have our DNS set up. So primary DNS for now, we don't need that yet, but we'll come back and have that set up or modified. So click next. Time zone, pick your time zone that you find yourself in. We're in GMT 0, right? This is GMT, or you can just pick whatever applies to your region. I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. But just make sure you pick the right region. Okay, wherever you find yourself in, look at your time zone region and pick whatever applies to you, so the system can sync very well. And click next. And then one configuration and one interface is taking IP address dynamically. So that's to leave that alone because it's picking IP address dynamically from the Vmware Workstation itself. If you don't want dynamic, then you configure static configurations for it. I wouldn't leave it dynamic for now. If you have other options for your internet connectivities, either point-to-point over Ethernet configurations for either dial-up or ADSL configurations, then you can go with some of these options. And once you're done, you just click next. And then your LAN IP address has got a default IP address of 192.168.1.1/24. Next. And then here you have to give your system, your router, a password, a login password. Change the default password to a much more secured password. Secured password that you're the only one that knows about it, and that can help you access the server or the router easily to do configurations by yourself or where you want to share that password with. But basically, you need to change the default password from the pfSense to your own defined password. So I've created my own password. Okay, once you're done, you just reload it. So all these new modifications that you've added to it can take effect. So congratulations, PS is now configured. So while we wait for it to reboot, let's go back to our setup and let's see what's going on over here. Okay, so there's a so admin has got a login. Okay, great. That's from this PC over here, or from the IP address over here. Okay, great. So by now I'm pretty sure it has reloaded. So let's just click here to continue with the web configurator. And now we're gonna be in the system itself now. So this is what your pfSense software router modules or many features that you have to work with or play around with comes with. You have your systems, advanced configuration, user management, updates, logins, whatever, logouts, interfaces, your WAN and your LAN, your firewalls, your NATs, your rules, um, aliases scheduling, traffic monitoring, and what have you. It has a number of cool features that you can use to address a number of system implementations. So keep that in mind. pfSense is very robust. It does a number of things, a number of settings at your disposal because open source. You have a countless amount of resources or setup or services that you can basically implement within it for all kinds of settings that you want. A really good system. Um, for small to medium sized organization, if you can afford high end routers with uh, with firewall settings or high end firewalls routers, the pfSense software router, which happens to be a router as well as a firewall router as well, can have a lot more options or can be an alternative for you to help address your business needs. Get VPN connections, VPN setups. Okay, so that's basically can play around with it. But for now, this is all that we need to set up. For what we have here for our setup, what is all that we need? We don't really need to do much fancy stuff. Those are much for later configuration or advanced settings that you need. Just this is good enough for us for our lab setup today or this time. So I'm just gonna uh, close the browser or minimize the browser here. Minimize the browser. Okay. So now we do have two guest systems running on our Type 2 hypervisor, VMware Workstation. And now we need to add, so basically we do have this. We do have the internet as well. Our cloud is set up as well automatically because I already have internet on my machine. So it's just sharing the internet cloud services with the entire system. So this app, virtual SSO app, and then one of our workstations app. Now let's move on to our server because it's going to play a key role in how these devices are going to be managed within our design setup over here. So let's move on to that. Um, Setup. So let's go back to our VMware. And to help us get started, since I'm using 8 gig RAM, I don't want the system to slow down during installation process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut off this machine so at least I have some system resource to work with for the installation of the uh, Windows Server. So I'm going to log out. Okay, my machine's already slowing down. Okay, so the logout has been activated. Okay, so I'm just gonna shut the machine down. Logout is taking effect. Let's shut the machine down. So at least I'm just doing this so at least we can have some system resource uh, handed back to um, the entire hyper server system, hypervisor system. So I can use that to address um, my my Windows Server, installation process because I don't want to stall the process.